Hiya. Today, just for a change, everyone is incredibly mad on the internet. And this time it's because we finally got the information about how Formula One's junior series, specifically for young women, is going to be broadcast, which is that it won't be. And I thought maybe it was a good time to kind of reflect on where F1 Academy came from, why it might be in the broadcast situation that it is, and what that means for the program itself in terms of promoting the junior drivers that are participating in it, and kind of the way that it's been organised and what's going on with it, especially going into the future. So, because I watch way too much BuzzFeed Unsolved, I thought we could start with like a timeline. So this actually goes back to before F1 Academy got announced, which is that on the 16th and 17th of September 2022, there was a test at Magny-Cours, which was a Formula 3 test that was being held for four young women who were all judged to be on the brink of taking that step into Formula 3, who all had the skills relevant for a test day. Now, FIA Formula 3 cars do not run private test days. In some junior series, you can do as much testing as you like if you have the budget for it. But the only test days that you get in FIA Formula 3, FIA Formula 2 are the officially sanctioned ones. And so it was a pretty special test day. It was an opportunity to work with genuine ART engineers, and it was Naraya Marti, Hamda Al Khabaizi, Abby Pulling, and why has my mind gone blank? Chloe Chambers from and at the time, three of them were in W Series, and Hamda was in Frege. And it was to look at their performance versus benchmarked against Victor Martin, and not necessarily looking at pure lap times, but at looking at what they were having difficulty with, where they needed more preparation to improve in order to be able to take the step into FIA Formula 3, and if there were physical limitations, which, to Formula 3's credit, they said that it's been almost entirely disproved that women have any physical limitations. The only thing they had seen was that, particularly for someone like Hamda, or in fact me, if you have really tiny hands, it's obviously quite hard to reach around the steering wheel. I have to wear children's sized gloves, even though I'm 5'11", and it's a problem in like regular road cars. I can only imagine how frustrating it would be in a single seater car. So that test is taking place, and at the time, there definitely was the sense that there was more to be announced. I was being told there was more to be announced, that there would be stuff coming in the future. And then only a few weeks after that, on the 2nd of October, W Series ran what would turn out to be its last race in Singapore, supporting Formula One. A week after that, the announcement that we'd kind of all not wanted or kind of anticipated, but feared and to some extent expected would happen came, which was that the series had run out of money for the rest of the season, and that was going to be it. At that point, everything kind of goes quiet. W Series says that it's regrouping, that it's gonna try and come back with a fresh start for 2023. To the best of my knowledge, it is still operating. To the best of my knowledge, there are actually still people working on it, and I don't want to suggest that W Series is actually at an end. It's clearly going through a difficult period, and particularly with the introduction of F1 Academy, things are looking very tricky indeed. But I worked in Formula E for a long time, and you can hold the bailiffs off for quite some time. So on the 18th of November, Formula One launches F1 Academy. And at this point, W Series is kind of like, I mean, it's still warm. And it's clear that this is a project that has actually had a fair amount of work done on it. And so, although it's using a standard Tatis T421 Formula 4 chassis, which is just the standard modern Formula 4 chassis, it's also had the agreement to use Auto Technica engines. An agreement's been made with Pirelli, which isn't a surprise given Formula One's prior existing relationship with Pirelli, but nevertheless, someone signed a contract somewhere. And there was also the confirmation of exactly how much budget the drivers would have to raise and how much was being contributed by the broader kind of F2, 3, and now F1 Academy junior series structure that's a separate sporting and business entity to Formula One, but kind of all rolled into the same cinematic universe, let's call it. By the 16th of December, the 5 teams get confirmed, which is Prema, Carlin, ART, MP, and Campos. All well established junior series teams, all of them already operating in F2, F3, or both. And it's not a huge surprise to see those names. Again, it's not a huge surprise to see them able to run F4 cars in an additional series next year. It's the kind of agreement that for a junior series team would be pretty standard. If it turns out that you can secure budget and you can start sorting stuff out for a new series, then you enter a new series. It's junior series teams are a lot more flexible in that respect than well, definitely Formula One teams or something like that. But it's not that wild to have not a huge amount of notice before a junior series team ends up in a series. By the 2nd of February this year, the first driver was announced, Lena Bula. And it was only the 21st of March by the time the final driver, Marta Garcia, was announced. So that was a pretty rapidly filling up grid for something that no one knew about until November the prior year, and where drivers are having to find a 6-figure budget. Admittedly, it's not as much as something like Formula 3 or Formula 2, where the costs can get pretty astronomical, but it is still a lot to have to go and find. Most of us don't have 150,000, well, ever in our lives. So in between those times, on the 23rd of February, so after the first drivers had been announced, they announced the calendar with the whole thing starting on the 28th, 29th of April in Spielberg, and then going right the way through to the 29th, 30th of July in Paul Ricard. And then, as is traditional for junior series now, just having like a 5-month break until going to COTA in mid-October. But I mean, you can say the same thing of Formula 2. So there we are. And the other thing that happened was that on the 1st of March, Susie Wolff was announced as coming in as the managing director for F1 Academy, which was some, to be honest, quite needed credibility and credentials for the series in terms of having someone who has a huge amount of background in encouraging women into motorsport, in working in programs that specifically speak to women, to young women, and that try to get more people involved in the sport, and who has a really strong background in having developed a team in Formula E, Vonchery, and also actually a driver development program at Voluntary, which, I mean, I don't know how much people know about driver development programs generally, but I suspect that the Formula E ones aren't a huge focus for a lot of people. It was the way that Norman Natho came through, though, and it is, and also Jake Hughes, actually, to some extent, both of whom have subsequently gone on. Norman is a race winner, Jake Hughes is pole sitter, so yeah. Then the rapidest bit of the entire timeline is that on April the 11th was the first Barcelona test day for the series. There were 2 test days there, then they went on to another one in Le Castellet, and now they're on track, or they've been on track today, April the 27th, when I'm recording this, at Spielberg, where they're supporting the P9 Challenge, which is a club sport series that's just for amateur Porsche drivers. That doesn't mean it's bad racing, necessarily, but it does mean it's not a high level series. It's not the kind of thing that's got a huge camera operation. It's not the kind of thing that's got an on-site international broadcast centre. So yeah, there will be some basic filming going on there, but it's relatively easy to see how, given the speed of the entire timeline of F1 Academy being put together, they maybe didn't manage to get everything in place for this weekend. It's worth looking back at W Series in this respect. So W Series was using Whisper, the Channel 4 production house that does Channel 4 Formula 1 and which is owned by David Coulthard, who was involved in W Series at the start. They were using their production but DTM's broadcast facilities, because it's actually really difficult to make even things like a digital broadcast, especially the second that you have international broadcast rights kicking in, where certainly on the digital side they were handled pretty jankily in the first season of W Series, and I can tell you how I know. It's because I was doing them. So there's a lot of complication to getting something to work from a racetrack. It's not, especially when there's an expectation to put together a production that is high quality and that does reflect a series that has the F1 logo attached to it. There will be people who are invested in the production of this who have nothing to do with it simply because it's got that logo attached to it. Which brings us to what they are offering, which is kind of an interesting statement. So F1 Academy told us where we could follow the racing or not, which was you can stay up to date with everything happening in the F1 Academy paddock with our round by round highlights program, which includes race footage and exclusive behind the scenes content from our drivers and teams. Ooh, wow, yay. The 15-minute program will be made available to all F1 Academy rights holding broadcasters by the Wednesday following race events. You'll also be able to watch the program on F1 TV and F1 Academy and F1 social media channels. On a Monday following the race weekend, a race highlights video will be made available across F1 Academy and F1 social media channels, YouTube and F1 TV. Across the race weekend, you can also follow the official F1 Academy Twitter channel for live multimedia updates from the track, including text commentary, imagery, clips from the race, and post-race interviews from our drivers. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. So, only a 15-minute highlight package is being put together. A 15-minute program is being put together. There's also a highlight package being put together, which means it is being filmed. And there's something else that's particularly interesting here, which is okay, it's going out on F1 social media, it's going out wherever. The F1 social media factor is a big thing because being able to say this is going on a channel with F1's following, even if it won't get the engagement and it won't get the viewership that, say, a clip of Mark Webber screaming at Lewis Hamilton going off in Baku would, then that will still have something very persuasive in terms of the audience for F1 Academy. But then there's this other sentence about all F1 Academy rights holding broadcasters, which suggests that some broadcast rights have been sold. Because this isn't going to be something that is part of the same package that Formula 2 and Formula 3 are. They're packaged up with Formula 1, and in almost all cases, they're sold to the same rights holder. They go through the same broadcast centre, everything is controlled through Biggin Hill, the Formula 1 world feed, and it's all organised by Formula 1 in terms of the production. Then they're also always alongside F1, well, bar all of the exceptions that you can comment with. But usually they are alongside Formula One, so it's a relatively easy continuation to just keep using Formula One's facilities. F1 Academy isn't part of that package, isn't part of anything that's been negotiated with Grand Prix venues. It's nothing to do with the broadcast rights there, it's nothing to do with any of the existing broadcast rights. So if any broadcast rights to F1 Academy have been sold or agreed, then those are new deals that have happened in the time since 18th of November last year, unless they were prior to that, which suggests that at some point there was actually a plan to broadcast this, and that this is not quite what anyone would have wanted. Something that definitely won't be what anyone wanted is the drivers who have just had to go and ask people for money and say, I'm going to wear your logo on my car, on my race suit, you're going to see me on the podium, and I'll be repping for your, I don't know, bottled water or power tools or watches or whatever else that you can get sponsorship as a junior driver for. And I write junior sponsor packs sometimes, certainly written more than a few in my time. And something that is really important is listing the TV audience, saying that it will be on TV, what package it's on, that it will be part of Grand Prix, maybe that there'll be people seeing it at the circuit, that audience is there, because the reason that the sponsors give you money isn't because they like you so much, it's because it's advertising, which when you're having to ask for €150,000 is quite important. And to now get told that, okay, yeah, it's going out to Formula One's millions of followers on Twitter, on the Formula One YouTube, that's all very well, but firstly, most sponsors don't really understand that YouTube as a concept, and certainly not as something that would necessarily reach their audiences. And secondly, it really just isn't the same as a TV contract, especially when you can say, well, I'm doing GB4 and it goes out at least as a highlights reel occasionally on ITV3. There is then the other flip side of all of this, which is F1 Academy is meant to be a purely development series and it's meant to be a stepping stone. This is not meant to be a spectacle in and of itself. It's meant to be a way of preparing these young women in a way that will mean that they can take the step into Formula 3 in a credible way. Arguably, that doesn't necessarily need to be done in public. And especially arguably, maybe it's better for young women to be able to develop without having millions of eyes on them all the time, without over scrutiny of something that is kind of meant to be an accelerator camp, essentially. The reason that, or one of the things that I think F1 Academy has got completely right, is Formula 4 is where young women tend to tail off in experience. They often either have no Formula 4 experience and instead do some kind of tin tops and then end up in F3 or a regional F3 equivalent, or they only get patchy seasons, they only manage to do a few races, there's never quite enough funding, it never seems to quite go right, and they're never in the right teams. They're certainly never getting any private test days. They're often turning up essentially in the arrive and drive situation rather than doing the test Thursday before a race. And so that's the point where you start seeing this vast gulf in terms of track time, in terms of experience. And these are all challenges that male drivers without the budget also face on a massive level. Motorsport is outrageously expensive and very unfair, but generally across all female drivers you can see that there is a distinct pattern here that they lose out at F4, and that's a crucial development stage in terms of a driver getting there. And there are loads and loads of factors. I could start listing them here and not stop for ages. It's things like they tend to start karting later, which means that they get up to a sufficient level later, which means that they're older. It makes more sense to skip to F3 than F4. Or if you only have the budget to take a shot at one, then F3 might be the best one if you're 19 and you're hoping to get any further. It's complicated, but this series is pitched right in that respect. On the other hand, it is also something that is going to be kind of sidelined. It's actually a 100 horsepower step back for quite a lot of the drivers, all of the ones who've previously been in W Series, all of the ones who've previously been in FRECA. It's significantly lower than FIA F3. And there is this slightly weird aspect to it, which is that in the midst of everything happening, Bruno Michel, the CEO of F2, F3, and someone who's been instrumental to lots of junior careers and makes those series happen to a fairly major degree, said that there was something specifically that they were working on in F1 Academy. In a press conference on February the 21st, he said, quote, "That's what we're trying to do with F1 Academy, helping young drivers to find budgets, and we subsidise ourselves quite a bit of the budgets as well. Now, coming to F3 is not only a question of finding the budget, it's also a question of making sure that they can do a proper job. Abby, pulling, is a very, very interesting and promising young driver, but when we tested her in F3, I can tell you she still had a little bit of experience to gain. And I think that's why it's important for her not to jump into F3 too early and to spend 1 year at least in F1 Academy to try and gain as much track time as possible." Now, it's true, and I see that now from all of the different drivers that I'm seeing coming into F1 Academy, it's not easy for female drivers to find budgets at the moment, and I hope this is going to change as well. How is that going to change if you can't see them? One of the biggest problems for any female driver in terms of securing a season, in terms of getting all that experience that they generally lack compared to their male peers, is that they're all massively financially limited. Even when you get people like Alice Powell, who was a Formula Renault champion, they just don't get the budget to go on the next step, and they either end up in a backmarking team or in a situation where they're just not getting any development opportunities. Her season of GP3 was characterised by her car blowing up basically every week, and it's one of the best examples in terms of someone fantastically talented who had the potential to be the next big woman, but just that sponsorship is not there. And anyone who tells you that there are more opportunities for female drivers, that there is more money out there for female drivers, it's just not true. It's always the barrier that they face. And there's also the bigger barrier of, if you're looking for F3 sponsorship money and you've got someone like Stefano Domenicali saying, well, no woman's going to make it to Formula One in the next half decade, the way that you negotiate a Formula 3 amount sponsor deal is you start promising bits of your F1 salary if you've really got no money. And that's quite hard if there's people like the CEO of Formula One saying, well, straight up, none of these people are going to get anywhere near it. So there's a lot of confusing things that are happening with F1 Academy. And I hope that maybe what we will see is some sensible stuff coming out of it. There's obviously some very good people involved. Susie Wolf in particular is somebody who I think can absolutely be trusted to be taking this very seriously and to have a real mission in the way that she's going to execute this project. But there are right now quite a lot of unresolved questions in terms of how it's actually going to produce someone who is capable of finding the budget for and taking the step to Formula 3 as early as next season.